It is the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive. I always get confused whether it's the deep dive or the deeper dive because with the article that's the deep dive and the show that's the deeper dive. I'm never quite positive if I wrote it down correctly or not, but I think I did for this one also. Rebranding a little bit, so since the show isn't actually directly live before lock, we're doing it as calling it the deeper dive instead, going game by game. Guys, we got a 6-game slate today. By the way, also 3-man booth here. We got Gundacker, we got Max. I don't know if the three of us have done a show before together. Have we had this grouping together yet?
I don't think so.
All right, well, there we go. We got something new going on here. And by the way, not all that we have going on here. We also have a giveaway. If you guys go to Awesemo_com on Twitter, if you predict the winner correctly of the Kentucky Derby, one correct winner will get a free month of Awesemo Plus. You have to like, retweet, and follow the tweet. It's posted at Awesemo_com, but then also follow at Side Action HQ on Twitter and then at Awesemo Odds. We were talking about this a little bit before about horse racing, whatever. I'm just going to put you guys on the spot. Do you guys have any clue who's racing today? I'll start with you, Max. Do you have a winner? Do you have odds in front of you? Just pick out. If not, I'll read out the names and you just pick a random one. It's not like it's going to be any different.
Yeah, read them out. I'll
Gundacker, are you opinionated on the Kentucky Derby, the racing at all?
I mean, I guess people like it, so I let people enjoy it, but I've never been able to it doesn't happen enough for me to want to research and be involved.
I feel you. All right, but here we go. We're gonna make picks right now. These are some of the favorites. We have Essential Quality, Rock Your World, Highly Motivated, Known Agenda, Hot Rod Charlie, Medina Spirit, Mandaloon, and then Soup and Sandwich. Those are the favorites.
That's it right there.
Soup and Sandwich?
Soup and Sandwich, because I like the sandwich. Sure.
All right, so Max is taking a mortgage on his house to bet on Soup and Sandwich. Gundacker, of the names that I just read, pick a random one. I don't know if you remember any of them.
I don't remember. Soup and Sandwich, that's the only one I caught. All right, it sounded like some album discography for a second.
Yeah, I'm going with Soup and Sandwich too. It's a clean sweep. Soup and Sandwich wins. Then we're cappers. We know what we're doing in terms of horse racing if Soup and Sandwich goes out and wins. But hey, let's talk about some of this MLB slate. We've got 6 games on the slate, and starting with the Boston Red Sox with the highest implied run total on the slate, or second highest implied run total on the slate. No, third at highest. I am totally off here just looking at. I don't even know why I tried to do that in my head really quick. I was like, where do they rank in terms of implied run totals? Like, they're actually third, but there we go. So Boston Red Sox, 4.79 implied run total. In Texas, take on the Rangers with a 3.71 implied run total. So Max, starting with you, what do you make of the pitchers in this spot? The Rangers obviously have been a weak offense. Is this a team that you might be looking to roster pitchers against?
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Rodriguez is interesting for sure. He's got a 2.81 xFIP this year, which is quite good. 12% swinging strike, 29% K percentage. So those are all really nice stats from the left side, obviously. And Texas just keeps throwing out a bunch of left-handed batters against left-handed pitchers, which is usually not a great idea. But for some reason, that's their strategy. So yeah, I always like rostering southpaws against them. Just gives you a little bit more upside as far as strikeouts go. So yeah, I'm really interested in Eddie Rodriguez. At 8,700 just feels pretty cheap for him in the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the best overall matchups on the slate. The Texas Rangers over the last couple of years have been one of the worst offense in the league against left-handed pitching. And then you compound that also with the fact they strike out a ton. They don't make any contact. They just swing and miss. And I mean, I think the player kind of perfectly encapsulates what this offense is Joey Gallo, right? He's going to hit a couple homers here and there. He's one of the best power hitters in the league, but he's going to strike out in a lot of his at-bats when he isn't hitting for power. And that's what we've seen a lot from the Rangers this year. They've had some good outings against left-handed pitching, but for the most part, it's a lot of swing and misses, a lot of strikeouts. So Gundacker, I'll go to you with Eduardo Rodriguez, clearly one of the top overall pitching options on the slate, but coming in at 23% projected ownership on Fanduel, coming in at 42% projected ownership on Draftkings. Currently the pitcher we have projected to have the most ownership on DK. Do you think he's warranted of being the most rostered pitcher today?
Because of the matchup, yeah. Martin Perez rocks like a 6% swinging strike rate, and he walked into a game against the Rangers the other night and had 7 strikeouts. So he's a contact pitcher. So I kind of look at that and I'm like, man, the Rangers just allow that type of upside to opposing pitchers, and Erod isn't actually a pitcher that will pitch for strikeouts. So I can't really argue against the ownership there. It definitely feels like one of my favorite matchups to start on the slate, and the roof is closed. So a plus situation for him. Are we talking about the stacks here for the Red Sox? You mentioned their implied run total. I like the Red Sox. I like targeting the Red Sox because they're very simple. Usually, if you got JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, and Rafael Devers, your job is done. And that's what we saw last night. Here and there, you might throw in a Kike Hernandez or Verdugo, but I don't really feel overly compelled with the bottom half of the lineup either. So, yeah, I'm in on Erod, and I'm probably in on the big three, and maybe RSVP on the four on a Verdugo or Kike or Vasquez. But I love how concentrated their upside usually tends to come from JD, Bogaerts, and Devers.
Yeah, I mean, I like how this is the place we start, where it's kind of like, hey, Eduardo Rodriguez, best pitcher on the slate, and the Red Sox maybe the best stack on the slate. I mean, they look like they're going under-owned on both Fanduel and Draftkings. In terms of a Fanduel stack, we have them with 15% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate, but only 11.5% projected ownership as a team. Then on DraftKings, we have them with 13% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate, and then a 12% ownership share. So, I mean, to me, the Red Sox definitely look like a team that I'm looking to stack up on this slate. Max, how do you feel about the Red Sox? Because I think they're one of the best teams to look at on the entire slate.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite stack just because of the ownership. I feel like the Braves are going to go over-owned. So I gravitate to the Red Sox more. And I actually like the bottom of their order for power with Renfroe and Dalbec. Lyles versus right-handers gives up 49% fly balls, only strikes at 14% of right-handers, and has a 5.63 xFIP. So I think you can get like some power down here in this order to go with your Martinez's, Bogaerts's, and Devers's to give your lineup some differentiation in the stack.
And then I know we all like Eduardo Rodriguez, but I'm just going to throw this out here, and I'll start by asking you, Gundacker. With all of the ownership going to Eduardo Rodriguez, we have no ownership going to the Texas Rangers, and also look like a team that's slightly positively leveraged just because they're only picking up about a 2% ownership share on FanDuel and DraftKings with 4.5% chance of being the top scoring team on the slate. Do you have any interest in hedging some of your shares of Eduardo Rodriguez with Ranger stacks, just given that there's almost no ownership there?
I don't know if I can get to a stack, but I would probably open up some Nick Solak into my Opto. And of course, the Aaron Joey Gallo exposure here and there. But Nick Solak, I'm digging him. Maybe a Jose Trevino. Culberson looks like the numbers are fine to take a stab at, but I don't think I want to have four Rangers in a lineup. But I'm kind of non-committal when it comes to the Rangers here.
Yeah, I mean, so here's how I feel about the Rangers for today, and then I'll ask you about this after, Max. I'm going to be getting so much exposure to Eduardo Rodriguez. He is currently my most exposed pitcher. That I kind of like that situation sometimes where Eduardo Rodriguez, as good as he is, it's not like he's a true ace, right?
Right.
Yeah. And whenever I kind of like the idea of taking very small percentage of my lineups that are going to be stacked against a pitcher that is already going to be really popular. It isn't like, it's different if it's like a DeGrom or a Scherzer type level pitcher who's picking up that much ownership, but somebody like Eduardo Rodriguez, so if he has a bad outing, it's not like nearly as surprising as it is when, you know, a true ace is a bad outing. And like we said, he's projected to be in nearly 50% of starting lineups. So I'm going to be hedging some of my lineups by making a small percentage of Ranger stacks, maybe like 3 or 4% of my lineups will be Ranger stacks just for that purpose, just for hedge reasons. Does that make sense to you, Max, or is this a team you're just going to stay away from overall?
Yeah, I mean, on a 6-game slate, like you obviously only have 12 teams to pick from. So it always makes sense to get some ownership versus a guy that's going to be owned, 40% and regular stakes, probably even higher, high stakes, like 60% high stakes. So yeah, it totally makes sense to me. Solak, Adalis has some power. Like this lineup isn't bad. Like, they are starting 3 lefties again with Lowe, Gallo, and Calhoun, but they're all good hitters. So yeah, I don't mind it. And when Eduardo Rodriguez gets in trouble, it's usually walks, right? So if you get a couple guys on and get a 3-run home run, like your stack's in a good spot already.
Yeah, and then the other thing to mention too before we move on, the Rangers, the Red Sox do not have a good bullpen. So if something happens where Eduardo Rodriguez does struggle with his command a little bit, walks some guys, gets out of the game early, the Rangers are going to be facing pretty easy pitching behind him. But either way, I'm just really making a case to make them as a contrarian stack there. But overall, the Red Sox are the team that I think I'm going to have the most exposure to overall as a stack. Eduardo Rodriguez looks like the pitcher I'm going to have the most ownership on. So that is definitely where the bulk of my exposure is going to lie. And a lot of that really is going to be based on what the ownership percentage is. And by the way, free content today on Awesemo.com is we do have MLB ownership projections are free today. So that is definitely something to check out and then help make decisions, because a lot of my baseball making decisions for DFS are not based on who I think are the best overall plays, but it's the best plays relative to what their ownership is. So next game on the slate here, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers taking on the Milwaukee Brewers. One of the games that is not expected to feature a lot of runs. Dodgers 3.66 implied run total. Milwaukee Brewers 3.34 implied run total. The reason being Brandon Woodruff going up against May tonight. So Dustin May, also one of the better young pitching prospects in baseball. He's really seen his strikeout stuff take an uptick this year. So Gundacker, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of the pitchers here? Brandon Woodruff, Dustin May. Which of them are you prioritizing?
Yeah, I like them both. Woodruff is really interesting to me because typically we've seen in the last couple of days, like Freddie Peralta yesterday, people are scared to pitch against the Dodgers, and it makes a lot of sense. But I'll still gamble on upper echelon pitcher, and Woodruff has Cy Young contending stuff. Unfortunately, he's in a league with Jacob deGrom, but he's been that good this year. So I think talent-wise, I'll go a little bit higher on Woodruff because I think he's the better pitcher. But yeah, I'm signed up on both pitchers, and then Dustin May would probably benefit from a much weaker opponent. 14% swinging strike rate on May so far this year, which is actually better than Woodruff's. I think Woodruff's leash might be a little bit longer than May's, but yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with the total and probably with the ownership. I'll be higher on the pitchers here. But with that said, you talk about hedge stacking. I'll probably just have, because of how condensed the slate is, we'll have exposure to the Dodgers lineup and a couple of these power lefties from the Brewers once we get that confirmed.
Yeah, so relative to ownership, I really like Brandon Woodruff and Dustin May individually as pitchers. So for reference, Brandon Woodruff today projected for 11% ownership on DraftKings. Our top pitchers tool has him with a 22% chance being one of the top two pitchers on the slate. Dustin May projecting for 8% ownership with 21% odds being the top pitcher on the slate. So even though Eduardo Rodriguez right now is the pitcher I have the most exposure to, he's in almost half the field's lineups. I'm still underweight to that number. And it's not like his odds of landing the optimal per our projections are that much different than guys like Brandon Woodruff and Dustin May. The difference is that Woodruff and May have a fraction of the ownership. So Rodriguez is certainly a safer play than Brandon Woodruff, but is he 4 times more likely to end up in the optimal lineup, which is what the ownership is right now? I think that's not the case. So to me, I'm going to be overweight to the field on Dustin May and Brandon Woodruff. I think they make for good pivots off of somebody like Eduardo Rodriguez. So Max, what do you make of Woodruff and May in this spot?
Yeah, obviously they're both amazing pitchers, but Woodruff has run really, really good this year. 0% home run up to fly ball percentage so far. So have not given up a home run yet. Will eventually. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he does it today. Dustin May, on the other hand, 33% home run fly ball percentage. So he has not run good at all. So May is getting unlucky. Woodruff is getting lucky so far. I would take Dustin May here with a weaker lineup. His stuff is actually a little bit better than Woodruff's, I think. 14% swinging strike, 37% strikeout rate. These are amazing stats. Like, he's finally getting to be the pitcher that we all thought he should be last year. For whatever reason, didn't get there last year, but this year he seems amazing. Yeah, the Dodgers lineup is definitely something I'm going to have exposure to, especially as one-offs going with some of my other stacks, just trying to pick up a home run here.
Yeah, so I mean, with Dustin May, and it's hard to know exactly, right? I'm not a pitching coach. Gundacker isn't a pitching coach. Max isn't a pitching coach. But we know coming up through the minor league system of the Dodgers, Dustin May was one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. And then when he broke onto the scene last year, he found some success. He was a little bit lucky, but he didn't really generate swing and misses, didn't really generate strikeouts, only 7.07 strikeouts per 9 innings. But the stuff was definitely there. He had an average fastball velocity of 99 miles per hour. It's 98.9 so far this year. He's also getting a little bit better movement this season. And just given how good the stuff is, I think that, to me, I'm just going to bet on the talent and him figuring out the strikeouts going forward. And since it's been there so far this year, I think it's going to be the case. I think he's going to be a really strong fantasy option this year, certainly more so than he was last year. So Dustin May and Brandon Woodruff, two guys that I'm looking to be overweight to the field on. for sure. And then I'm just going to throw this back to you really quickly, Max. I know Gundacker talked about it, but I don't think you had mentioned it. In terms of stacking Brewers or Dodgers, personally, these are teams I don't really have interest in, but how about for you?
Yeah, I like one-offs much better, like taking a Corey Seager or a Muncy, somebody with power upside. Or I think Gundacker was saying taking like a Brewer, one of these guys like Vogelback or something, in hopes that they run into one, and give the stack that you are putting them with a nice boost.
All right. And the next game on the slate, we have the Atlanta Braves taking on the Toronto Blue Jays. So this game, which is basically taking place this makeshift Blue Jays field. It's basically like an elementary school they're playing in, where there literally is an elementary school across the field, and that's where we're seeing long home runs. They hit kids in the head, it breaks car windows, all that stuff. But I mean, that's where we see this game. 5.53 implied run total for the Braves. For the Toronto Blue Jays, 4.97 implied run total. And while those are definitely daunting numbers, the one thing we have to look at here is the Atlanta Braves, at least on DraftKings, picking up a 20% ownership share. On Fanduel, the Atlanta Braves picking up a 16% ownership share. So, Gundacker, I'm going to ask you to start. Do you think this kind of ownership is warranted on the Atlanta Braves?
Man, this small of a slate, we've gotten, 4 teams in, and we weren't necessarily enamored with anyone other than the Red Sox. So, process of elimination, probably. I hate when ownership gets that high because you just feel like the smart move in baseball with the variance is to go the other way. But this ballpark is just magical. But maybe something like last night happens again where only one team pops off. And in that case, it was the Blue Jays. But yeah, I'm probably there with the field, if not over the field, on this game, and probably the Braves as well.
And then I'm going to mention this before I go back to Max, because I've made a really big point over the last week or so about not stacking the Yankees because their ownership has been so high. Yeah. But here's why I think this slate at least is a little bit different with the Atlanta Braves. So on DraftKings, we have them with 21% projected ownership, but 22% odds of being the top stack on the team. So what we've seen with the Yankees on a lot of slates recently, why I feel differently about the Braves than I have about the Yankees as of late, is that the Braves are still positively leveraged on DraftKings, even with all that ownership going to them. Like what we've seen from the Yankees recently has been slates where they're like 36% owned with like 15% chance of being in the optimal lineup. That's not the case today. We have a team that's actually outpacing their ownership based on odds of being the top scoring team on the slate, because a lot of it is the park factor. The stadium seems so favorable to offenses that personally I'm willing to be there, even though they're picking up that much ownership. So do you feel any differently than me, Max? Or do you also think that the Atlanta Braves, the ownership is warranted?
So the reason the Yankees were so chalky, right? Let's just say the exact reason, right? The fact that they're the Yankees and that they were super underpriced. So DraftKings has been underpricing them because they had a rough start to the year. But obviously that's not going to last. Like the reason the Braves are going to be held down in ownership today is because they're all 5K and up. Like all the guys who want a roster are super expensive. So in that case, I love going over the field on a stack like this, just because a stack that's supposed to score a ton of runs, like they're going to face Tommy Malone in a Little League park. There's going to be a lot of fly balls, and hopefully they go out of the yard. It doesn't hurt that it's 80 degrees and the wind is blowing out at 10 miles an hour. Like everything is in their favor today. Obviously it's baseball. Anything can happen. They can get a bunch of infield fly balls for most of this game and score like 2 runs. But I would bet on the Braves exploding here. And I like going over the field up on that 20%.
Yeah, and by the way, so relative to ownership, I still prefer the Red Sox to the Braves overall as a stack. Yeah. But the Braves are still going to be a team I have to prioritize. The Blue Jays as well. And actually, those are right now my 3 favorite stacks on the slate are really the only 3 teams that I have significant interest in are the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and the Braves. So those 3 teams are going to make up the bulk of my stacks. So Gundacker, I'm going to throw this back to you. The Blue Jays playing on the other side of the game, picking up about half the ownership of the Braves. To me, I think this is a team to be overweight to the field on. They still are benefiting from the same park factors, but we have a lot more of the ownership overall focusing on the Braves. So what do you see from Toronto as a stack today?
Yeah, so yesterday was probably a Blue Jays fan's first glimpse of what the dream is for this team. They got George Springer back. They had Teoscar Hernandez return. Alejandro Kirk was representative of 2 of their homers. He likely doesn't catch the lineup today, but just from an overall standpoint, this is that offense, this is that defense that they're looking at, and this offense is dangerous. Charlie Morton, in and of himself, his metrics are a fine pitcher. Matter of fact, he's probably been a little bit unlucky this season. So maybe he can keep these ground balls to hold the Blue Jays at bay. But talent-wise, park-wise, I got to gamble on the Blue Jays to kind of get there. And then when that bullpen comes in, the hits kept on coming yesterday against that Braves bullpen. So if they're able to muster Charlie out and maybe like 4 innings, get an extra inning of bullpen exposure to chip in a chair, this team is violent. So I'll definitely be over the field on the Blue Jays as well.
So I'm going to ask you now, Max. Charlie Morton is definitely still a top-end starting pitcher. Not quite an ace, but he's, a pretty solid 2-3. Also got some strikeout upside. Gundacker also mentioned he's somebody who's capable of generating ground balls, so maybe he could mitigate the damage of this, crazy Little League park a little bit. But for you, Charlie Morton, is he a pitcher that you have any interest in for contrarian purposes, or are you also just going to be loading up on Toronto?
Yeah, no, I love Morton. I think he's been like Gundacker said, he's been unlucky this year. Gave up like a couple grand slams. Where he walked some guys, but 24% hard contact on the year, 50% ground balls, 12% swinging strike, 28% K percentage. He's really, really good, especially against right-handers. And all the power that the Blue Jays have and all their star players are really from the right side. So I think he can mitigate the park. I think he can mitigate this lineup, and he's coming at 5% ownership. So because I'm picking up so much chalk everywhere else, I feel like he's a great guy to pair with your chalky lineups and get him in single digits and give yourself upside that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, right now, at least if you look at our top pitchers tool on DraftKings, he's projected for 5% ownership, overall 14% odds of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. So that seems to rate out at least where he's going a little bit under owned. But I'm going to ask you, I know that, Max, you mostly play on DraftKings, but Fanduel is a single pitcher site. Even there, would you still be willing to take a look at Charlie Morton?
I don't think you need to on the one pitcher side, just because there's so many other ways to differentiate. But on DraftKings, if you're going to stack the Braves, or if you're going to stack even Boston and take like an Eddie Rodriguez, I think it makes a lot of sense to go with a Charlie Morton and get a high upside pitcher at 5% ownership.
All right, guys, we are almost halfway through the show. And don't forget, please do like the video, subscribe to the YouTube network as well, because if you do that, then our favorite horse, Soup and Sandwich, guaranteed to win the Kentucky Derby. As long as you guys like and subscribe, because, very experienced handicappers in horse racing, Max, Gundacker, and I, we've been in on the horse racing scene for all of 18 minutes now, and I feel pretty good about our pick of Soup and Sandwich to win. But I think this game's really important, so I don't want to move past it too quickly. Also, we have, short slate, so we could focus on these games individually a little bit more. But Gundacker, who are the Atlanta Braves hitters that you want to single out and get the most exposure to? And are there any guys at the bottom of the order who maybe aren't picking up quite as much ownership that stand out to you to make the lineup maybe a little bit different?
Ronald Acuna is number one by far. Ozzie Albies had a solid game last night. I'm trying to get a little creative down at the bottom of this order. They do pick up the DH spot, playing the AL Park. So maybe Pablo Sandoval is a name we don't ever get to roster. He's bare bones min price on FanDuel. And that's borderline of free square considering the environment and the offensive implied run total. So a couple fun names there. I hate to be ultra basic though with Acuna, Freeman, and Ozuna Albies, but I do think there's some ridiculous value at the bottom half of this lineup with Riley and Pablo Sandoval from a FanDuel perspective.
Yeah, Riley is the guy for me. We've seen he opened the year, he was hitting for no power, but we've seen it come back a little bit over the last week. And also, just given Austin Riley, he was somebody who I think his average home run distance was second of any player in baseball. It's just off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's something like that. And that just goes to show when he makes contact with the ball, it goes very far. And given how tiny this ballpark is, I think Austin Riley is one of the guys at the bottom of this order that does have a chance to hit 1 or 2 home runs in this spot. So I do think it makes a whole bunch of sense if you're just going away from the ultra chalk, top of the lineup bat. So I'm going to ask you the same question, Max. Which Braves are you focusing on? And anybody at the end of the order, like maybe an Austin Riley that does stand out to you?
Yeah, the two guys are Ozuna and Acuna versus left-handed pitching. They actually have not been very good versus southpaws in 2020 and 2021 so far. But those two guys obviously smash. They both have like 46% hard contact and crazy ISOs, like 308. And Ozuna has a 397 ISO versus left-handed pitching in the last 2 years, which is just crazy. Yeah, don't forget like Freddie Freeman hitting from the left side. He also hits left-handers just as hard as he does right-handers. Not for as much power, but you don't really need him to like homer for you in the middle of that stack, and he can always come through against the bullpen. Yeah, like you already mentioned Austin Riley. I play him every time I play the Brave stack just because of his upside. And Dansby Swanson's been running really unlucky this year so far. I think the hits are going to start coming. He's had like a million line drive outs so far.
And he's also reasonably priced on Fanduel and Draftkings, at least relative to the other batters in the Braves lineup. Like other than like Gundacker mentioned Pablo Sandoval, he's really cheap on Fanduel and Draftkings. By the way, we do have the Braves lineup, and Pablo Sandoval is officially in the lineup, and he is batting 7th tonight. So like Gundacker said, he is the flat min on Fanduel. He's only 2,700 on DraftKings. So that is at least one way we could stack somebody and at least save some salary, because for the most part, that is a pretty expensive offense. Next game on the slate, we have the Arizona Diamondbacks taking on the Colorado Rockies. Zach Gallen, one of the chalk pitchers on the slate. And then we have Austin Gomber, who I've been on the wrong side of in every single one of his starts so far this year. So Gundacker, starting with you, what do you make of Zach Gallen as a chalk pitching option in a game where a Rockies offense has struggled against right-handed pitching and obviously have sucked for a while when you take him out of Coors Field?
Yeah, Gallen. So it looks like he's been luckier this year than his Sierra and xFIP suggests, but his Sierra and xFIP aren't necessarily bad in context of the slate, and then parlay that with the matchup being what it is. I like to see that the roof is closed. Yesterday, I looked it up. It said the roof might be open into the game. We'll see if that has changed, but I saw temperatures projected to be in 100 degrees. So if they okey doke us and pop that roof open, I might change my tune here. But Zach Gallen, definitely somebody I'm interested in because I do believe in his ability to get strikeouts, and the Rockies lineup can be pretty weak outside of Story McMahon so far this year. So I do like some Gallen. On the Gomber side, I will probably target a couple of these D-backs. I think Carson Kelly has become one of my favorite niche catchers against lefties because he tends to hit the top of the lineup as well. We've seen him lead off. Today looks like he's in the 2 spot. I love the 2 spot from a hitting perspective. So I like Carson Kelly there. As Drupal Eduardo, yeah, I like the 2-3-4 combination there. So I do like a couple bats here, but I think I will roster a decent chunk of Zach Gallen tonight.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. I know sometimes it'll happen to me where I'll get caught up in some of the ERA versus expected ERA and FIP numbers and stuff and be like, oh, this guy's gotten lucky so far this year. But the numbers are still, it's not like they're bad for Zach Gallen, right? I mean, he has a 2.16 ERA, and then you look at, his FIP is 3.07, his xFIP is 4.07, but he's limiting hard contact. That's one of the reasons his home run to fly ball rate is down. He's also striking out a bunch of guys, 10.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. The walk rate is a little bit of concern, but like you said, even if he has been a little bit, lucky, even if we look at his underlying numbers, it's like he should actually have an ERA somewhere in the range of 3. That's not all that bad, especially when you consider such a positive matchup against the Colorado Rockies. So, Max, how high of a priority for Zach Gallen on this slate is he for you, and how does he rate up against Eduardo Rodriguez?
I mean, Gallen's amazing, right? Like his stats are basically the same as Charlie Morton's. Like I can't even find anything that's dissimilar. He gives up more hard contact than Charlie Morton, but that's about it. So I guess where I'm going is that for me, I would play Eddie Rodriguez just because of the strikeout upside I like more than I like Zach Gallen's strikeout upside in this matchup. Yeah, the Rockies are awful, but like maybe they open the roof or something, and it's still not a bad hitting ballpark. So, I mean, McMahon is like one of my favorite guys to break out this year. So hopefully he does something against Gallen because I'm gonna try and fade him because of that ownership because I'm playing Rodriguez. Just can't get them both in the same lineup and like look at my lineups and not hate them. So yeah, that's really my only issue with Gallen. But other than that, obviously he's a great player.
Yeah, so one thing that is kind of interesting about this slate is that we do have a lot of high-priced pitchers, right? There's a lot of expensive guys to go to. There's a lack of cheap pitchers to really feel good about. So I think something before we go on further, we should kind of talk about like overall lineup construction and what we're looking at for this slate. Because I mean, so far we said we really like the Braves a lot, and we've said we like the expensive pitchers. That's all. That's all well and good. Except, I mean, when we're being realistic about lineup construction, I wish we could just say, hey, let's play the two most expensive pitchers. Let's play the highest priced pitcher. And then, hey, look, we've got all the most expensive everything in our lineup, and it looks great. Except that doesn't really work within a lineup construction. So for that reason, Gundacker, like, what are your lineups actually looking like overall for this slate if you've built them so far? How are you going about stacking the Braves and then also paying up for some of these starting pitching options?
So on FanDuel, it's going to involve a nice chunk of Pablo Sandoval and Austin Riley, it looks like. On DK, I don't have that one bridge just yet, like a stick of glue 2K catcher. Even Carson Kelly's priced up. So I have to do a little bit more digging on DK. I probably just have to YOLO a couple of power bats with high strikeout rates. I got really lucky yesterday with that Twins first baseman outfielder Kirilloff getting me a pair of jacks, but I don't see somebody like that in like the heart of a lineup that I'm at. Maybe a Dallas Garcia at 3,700. I hate to hedge against my starting pitcher there, but yeah, I think on FanDuel it's gonna be a little bit easier to make that happen than DK from first glance.
Yeah, and I mean, something else that's going to change just a little bit is, like, I don't have my lineups built yet because we don't have starting lineups yet. The only starting lineup we had out, or at least by the time the show started, maybe more of them come out as we've been doing it, but the Braves lineup was the only lineup that was out so far. So my intuition, or at least because this is what normally happens, there's going to be, a couple of guys that end up in pretty good lineup positions that are going to be relatively cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. And then that'll make it easier to go with like 4 or 5 man stacks within just as many value plays as I could fit in, and then pay up for pitching. That's probably what a lot of my lineups are going to be on DraftKings: 5 man stacks and then 3 one-offs that are cheap. Max, what is it going to look like for you in terms of just overall lineup construction today?
Yeah, I mean, I have expensive stacks with like Bobby Dalbec, 3,400, Hunter Renfroe, 3,100. Sandoval, you guys already mentioned. Christian Pashy is 2.2K in the Braves lineup, hitting all the way at the bottom, but he has a little pop. So I don't mind that. Yeah, I'm just kind of fitting in cheap guys in good lineups that I feel like are going to turn over a lot.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that's generally how I feel here. And then I'm going to ask you, because I know Gundacker's already talked about the stacks for this game, but Rockies or Diamondbacks, do you like either of these teams as stacks, Max?
Yeah, let's just talk about Carson Kelly and give him some props.
Sure.
He is 5th in XWOBA in the league, above Mike Trout, above Aaron Judge, above Nelson Cruz, and right below Juan Soto and Bryce Harper and Acuna. So the guy's just absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. I mean, Gomber is terrible, right? Like, I know you've been on the wrong side of him, but he has an 8% swinging strike rate and a 5.67 Sierra, 5.14 xFIP. Like, these stats are not good. I definitely think a D-back stack is warranted here. You can get some high upside bats, and I don't think they're going to be that owned. In our top stacks tool, they're about, they're actually 15% and have a pretty bad leverage score. So maybe I'm going to rethink that, just because I guess people are trying to stack them with the expensive pitchers.
Yeah, so right now on FanDuel, at least, the Diamondbacks are actually picking up more ownership even than the Braves are.
That's crazy.
It's comparable, though. On DraftKings, we have the Arizona Diamondbacks with a 16% ownership share, so they are by far the most negatively leveraged offense, and they are the second most popular offense behind the Atlanta Braves. So I just look at those numbers, and that's why I just think Arizona not a team I want to be on, just because they're so popular to a point that just doesn't really make sense to me. Like, we have them with an 8% chance of being the top scoring team of the day. That's fine. Those are decent odds for an offense that's also relatively cheap. But then you just look at the ownership all the way at 15.8%, way over-owned. So for me, this is a team I don't have all that much interest in. And by the way, I kind of understand why the field's getting here, right? Austin Gomber, a guy who all the peripheral numbers suggest should not be pitching well going forward. And the day that I was talking about being on the wrong side of him was I stacked against him really heavily for, I want to say it was his first Coors start of the year. And he was just kind of like shut down that start. And it was like, I just killed a whole bunch of my lineup. So I don't know. I just think of that day whenever I see a slate with Austin Gomber. But a lot of people are looking at the underlying numbers with Gomber and then also seeing that the Diamondbacks are a relatively cheap offense and that everybody's paying up for pitching on this slate. Therefore, this is one of the stacks that works with the expensive pitching. So a lot of people go into the Diamondbacks. I think one of the easiest ways to differentiate if you're playing multiple lineups today is just either being off the Diamondbacks or being underweight to them as a stack, because they are much, much too popular for my taste. Next game on the slate that we have here, and just 2 games left, and we still got some more time to fill here. So if you guys have questions to ask, definitely fire them into the YouTube chat, fire them in the premium Slack chat, and we could hit on some of those also. But here we have the San Diego Padres going up against the San Francisco Giants. The Giants have the lowest implied run total on the slate at 2.99. Padres then a 4.01 implied run total on the other side. So Gundacker, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of Blake Snell in this spot? I actually think the Giants offense a little bit underrated this year. And then also, I'm always a little concerned about Blake Snell's pitch count, just the way the Padres have handled him this year. So how do you think his upside compares to some of the other high-end pitching options?
Yeah, he does not give you the warm and fuzzies when you roster him because of the pitch count and the propensity to become a little wild at times. So far, a 1.45 whip on the season, a 12.8% walk rate. And we've seen them hook him really quickly if he does get in a jam. So I'm definitely worried about that. The Giants are pesky in terms of strikeout potential, especially against lefties. And I do like the Giants as a team generally against lefty. I don't think I'll take to the end of the road and go crazy with Giant stacks today, but they have the ability to put together a fun lineup like Wilmer Flores, Slater, Evan Longoria, the revival of Buster Posey. Like, there's some bats in there that can get off against a lefty. With that said, Blake Snell, when he's on, and this bullpen's been pretty locked down for the Padres. So I'll probably just have some exposure to some Giants stacks, but it'll probably be like out 5 to 6% in a $1.50. Snell, I feel like you have to have some shots on him. You Darvish was somebody I was a little bit under inspired yesterday, but he ended up being rock solid. So you just gamble on him being on and having that upside game. So I'll have some Snell. It won't be much. I'll have some Giants. Won't be much. And then I'll be on Padres.
All right. And now Max will ask you, by the way, this is how deep Blake Snell has gone into each of his starts this year. He has pitched 4 2/3 innings. 5 innings, 2/3 of an inning, 5 innings, 5 1/3 innings. He's averaging, looks like right around 80 pitches per start this year. So, Max, what do you make of Blake Snell here? We have a lot of high-end pitching options to go to. To me, I don't think Blake Snell is going to be somebody I'm getting to a ton, just because the ownership is so high. And I think there's other guys I'd rather get to. I'd rather get to guys with less ownership. But Blake Snell, how does he stack up against some of the other pitchers that we've talked about that we like so far?
Yeah, the problem was the upside, right? Like, it's hard to envision him against this lineup. And because the Giants, like Gundacker said, are pesky and don't really strike out against lefties that much, it's hard to envision him getting like a 10 strikeout, 7-inning performance, because they're not going to let him throw 110 pitches. And he likes to nibble. Like, Blake Snell is the king of getting to an 0-2 count and then being 3-2, So it's just tough to roster him when we have such a wealth of pitching on the slate at pretty much every ownership you can think of. And it's not like he's going to be unowned. You're not going to get him at 1% ownership or whatever. He's projected to be 40%. That's insane. Like, he's one of the chalkiest pitchers we have. And because of the name recognition, I think that is really something that boosts this guy's ownership all the time. But when you look at his underlying stats, they're not any different than like a Dustin May or a Woodruff or a Morton or any of these other guys. So I'm not going to get to any of him in my 3 max teams. I would have some of him if I was playing 150, just in case he binks like 12 strikeouts or something somehow. But that's about it as far as Snell goes, I think.
All right, and then on the other side of the game, we have Anthony DeSclafani starting for the Giants. DeSclafani's had a solid year so far. He has been striking out a ton of guys this year, generated a lot of swing and misses. And Gundacker, we have the San Diego Padres today, picking up a 5% ownership share, 6% chance being the top scoring team overall in our top stacks tool. So looks like they're going about fairly owned. There's other teams that I want to prioritize over the Padres, but I'll ask you, is the Padres a team that you want to get to as a stack?
Yes. I'll say if you just isolated DeSclafani's advanced metrics this season, a 1.5 ERA, 3.4 Sierra, a 3.23 xFIP, 12% swinging strike rate. Like, if you just show me those without a name, it might be a while before I guess Desclafani. That's incredible. So looking at that, like, it's hard to feel inspired to stack the Padres, but I think Padres are going to be more of a talent stack. I like the names here. And one of the things I really love about the Padres, and it's been a while since I've been able to gravitate towards a team like this. I think about the D-backs a couple years back when they had David Peralta and Tomas, Yasmani Tomas, guys like that. This is a lineup that has power, but they are also extremely aggressive on the bases. They lead the league in stolen bases by like 11. They're averaging over like 1.2 stolen base a game. They're gonna run. So even when you're not getting the long balls, you're getting a team that if they draw a walk, they might parlay that into a stolen base attempt. Machado is tied for the lead in stolen bases on this team with 5. So I like the floor and potential upside of the stolen bases with the power that they do have. But that's more of a betting on talent versus analyzing the opposing pitcher's metrics and wanting to pick on them.
Yeah, and I think all that makes sense. So, Max, I'm going to ask you, I know to me, I don't really like the Padres as a stack today, but do you feel any differently than that? Or is there just any player that you're kind of honing in on as a one-off from the Padres?
Yeah, for me, the only reason I would stack the Padres is because Desclafani is going to regress. What is it? 1.5 ERA, 3.5 Sierra. Obviously 3.5 is very good, but 247 BABIP, that's going to go up. 8% home run to fly balls, that's going to go up. All these metrics are going to go up. So you're just hoping he regresses all in one start against the team you stack him against. The stack that you play against him. So yeah, I mean, it's not one of my favorite stacks. I definitely like Desclafani as a pitcher. I rostered him last time. He had a complete game shutout. He was lights out against Colorado. But obviously, he's not going to keep this level of pitching up. There's going to be some bumps in the road. So you're just hoping that the bump in the road is today.
And guys, if you do have interest in signing up for Awesemo Plus, maybe just want to dip your toes in the water, see if it's for you, want to see what all the tools are about, you get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $15.95 for MLB Awesemo Plus. And then if you just want to get something that's going to cover all of the sports that we offer for DFS, you get an overall Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. But like I said, if you're just interested in MLB, that is $15.95 for an MLB Awesemo Plus weekly package. So definitely something that is worth trying out. If you're into it, you get access to all the tools you have on the site, ownership projections, top stacks tool, top pitchers tool. I know for me, these are totally invaluable tools. These are things that I use a ton in my process and are very helpful because I would not be able to eyeball it and just figure out like what I think the ownership is going to be because I wouldn't know how to do that. So it definitely helps me a lot, but only one game left to talk about on this slate. If anybody has questions after this, we could hit on some of those. So fire those up, but the Los Angeles Angels with a 4.52 implied run total, taking on the Seattle Mariners with a 3.98 implied run total. Now, something to mention there. It's something I always used to make fun of my dad for when I was younger, where he would say like a team's name, where he'd be like, "Oh, it's the Baltimore Colts." And I'm starting to find that now, where it's like I see the Angels, it's like that's the Anaheim Angels, and I'm always like, I always have to remind myself the Los Angeles Angels. I should just start putting that on my run sheet that it's Los Angeles Angels instead, but. I'm finding myself falling into that a lot because I'm getting old. But Gundacker, Angels, Mariners, do either of these teams stand out to you as a stacking option?
I mean, you can make a case for both of them. Obviously, the Angels are a little easier to sell anyone on with Ohtani, Trout, Jared Walsh, Rendon. They have plenty of pop. This Mariners starter projects poorly against lefties. Not a ton of sample size to go off of in the big league. I got 23 innings total in the last 2 years. So I don't know whether the call for progression or regression, but again, bank on talent situation, Mike Trout against anybody, Shohei Ohtani against anybody. So I can get behind Angels exposure. Mariners are a little bit more interesting. I do feel like every night I look up, there's a Mariner causing a stir at the top of the lineup, a Mitch Haniger bomb or Sam Haggerty stolen base. Like there's some one-off potential here. I don't know if I can get to a full stack on them, but I'll probably cherry pick from them and hopefully find some value more so on the Draftkings side. We talked about needing some value, maybe Haggerty for that stolen base potential. But outside of that, I don't think I want to stack him.
And then something I'm going to mention here also, Griffin Canning, who to me is a vastly different play on DraftKings and Fanduel. The reason being is that we need to roster 2 pitchers on DraftKings, and Griffin Canning only 7,200 on DraftKings. The 6,000 price tag on Fanduel, I certainly think it's viable, but there's so many pitchers to pay up for that I don't think you have to go to Griffin Canning. But it's such a cheap price point for Canning when we've already talked about we like all these expensive offenses. We like all these expensive pitchers. To me, Griffin Canning is somebody I almost feel like I have to get some exposure to as an SP2. So, Max, what do you make of Griffin Canning as a cheap starting pitcher? Because there is nobody that I really like for cheap outside of him.
Griffin Canning has cost me so much money. Very short MLB career. He's got a 15% swinging strike rate this year. The best on the slate out of anyone. But he also has 8.4 ERA somehow. His xFIP is 3.78, which is great. But somehow he always gets himself in trouble and gives up these home runs that lead to very short outings and not a lot of fantasy points. I would say that he's a great play, except for the fact that he's going to be 40% owned. Because just like you guys, everybody's going to gravitate to him at 7,200 facing these Mariners, which means for me, I really like, if I was stacking a really cheap team, it wouldn't be the D-backs. It would be the Mariners for me.
All right. And then, by the way, guys, also, no questions yet in the YouTube chat, but at least this. Throw out some hot takes. What do you think is the dumbest thing that is somewhat likely to happen on the slate? And then I'll go read those off, and maybe we'll agree with them, maybe we'll disagree with them, but maybe some hot takes in the YouTube chat. Maybe that'll get some conversation going, get people fired up. But Gundacker, what is your take on Griffin Canning today? And do you like him as an SP2 on DraftKings? If you don't, is there any other cheap starting pitching option that you do gravitate towards on DraftKings?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth taking a shot on that swinging strike rate to develop into a 4-inning, 5-6 strikeout game, even if he gets kicked out early. You're not, again, the warm and fuzzy take here. He's not going to make you feel wholesome here. He's a little more expensive than a couple of bats I want to roster. And, maybe I just play him for home run points at that point, 12 to 16 as a floor ceiling projection. And the swinging strike rate says there's potential for a 20 plus if all goes right. So yeah, a little bit, but I don't love it. Yeah. What was the other part? It's about
I was just asking. So, because one of the things I was talking about, just the overall lineup construction on this slate, is if we're going with a cheap SP1 and an expensive SP1 and expensive stack offense, it's hard to find a cheap SP2 to like. So that's something that gets me to Griffin Canning, is just because I don't feel like there's another option. So if you don't like Griffin Canning all that much on DraftKings, is there somebody else that you want to get to as an SP2?
We've pretty much touched on it. I would say Zach Gallen and Max made some good points on Charlie Morton. Morton being able to neutralize righties the way he can with his ground ball and strikeout potential. While we were chopping up that last game, that Blue Jays lineup did come out, and there's only 2 lefties. I got Kevin Biggio and Joe Panic. So he might stun people at 8.2K and, get to 2025. So I'm still going to have I'll probably be over the field on both the Blue Jays and Charlie Morton, but I think I'm starting to warm up on the idea of Morton not getting shelled 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I know that Max was on him too. And I mean, look at it. If you're talking about being overweight to the field on him, it's not hard to do. I mean, if you play 20 lineups, right? Charlie Morton's projected for 5% ownership right now. You put Morton in 2 of 20 lineups, and you're double the field on Charlie Morton. It's not a hard number to come out on top of. And then, I mean, like you just said it there, we had the Blue Jays lineup. I hadn't seen that come across yet, so thank you for pointing that out. But with only 2 lefties in there, that does give me a little bit more credence to maybe look at Charlie Morton as a contrarian pitching option. So Max over there was ahead of the curve, but it looks like maybe we're catching up to him at this point. Only a couple minutes left. We didn't get questions in there. We didn't have hot takes, so I guess we're just gonna have to end the show in a second. But Max, closing thoughts on the slate? Any overarching thoughts?
Yeah, just give yourself some leverage somewhere. There's going to be a lot of chalk, and it's not bad chalk. Most of the chalk that we talked about is good plays. So these are the highest projected plays. Most of the time, they're going to work out. But just give yourself a little bit of leverage in some lineup spots where you are going to be different than most of the other guys on the slate.
All right, and here we go. We got one hot take in the YouTube chat. So this is what we could close with. Our guy Joey C in here, he has thrown out the closing words on the show, which he's saying his hot take is that Brandon Woodruff gives up 5+ earned runs for the first time since 2019. I didn't realize it had been that long since he gave up 5 or more runs, but hey, if there was any matchup it would come in, it would be one against the Dodgers. So guys, that is going to do it for us. If you have not done so already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We still have the MMA Live Before Lock show coming up. We've got the NBA Deeper Dive. We've got NBA Live Before Lock. I'm going to be doing that later on the day. So you're going to want to check out all of that stuff as well.